Aloys is about a lonely private investigator living in Switzerland, a loner who has the professional approach to never interact with the subjects of his investigations, preferring to film them from a distance with his video camera. He has the odd habit, however, of not only filming people, but re-watching tapes of people who are not subjects of his job over and over and over again. It is implied early on that he hates personal contact with people and prefers to be isolated from the rest of the world. In the beginning of the film, he loses the one person he was ever close to, his father, and on the bus ride home from the funeral, he drinks himself to unconsciousness and his camera gets robbed. A short time later, a woman calls him on the phone who says that she has watched all of the tapes and is planning on sending them back to the film's subjects, but she says that she might reconsider under one condition. If he decides to committing to a sort of mind game called telephone walking, it's when both callers concentrate on a location or a scenario and imagine being there while walking with each other, and as their conversations unfold in a strange way, they slowly start bonding, slowly start getting to know each other, and slowly start caring about each other. Unsurprisingly, this is also a film that has been compared to several other much more well-known films, like The Conversation, for example, which is also about an investigator obsessively rewatching and re-listening to tapes in order to come to some sort of conclusion about a case. Aloys, especially in the first act of this film, does pretty much the same thing. He obsessively rewatches and re-listens to tapes in order to figure out the identity of the mysterious caller. It has also been compared to Her, which is similarly also about a romantic relationship emerging between these two people who are communicating through a device, but who don't actually end up coming into a physical connection with each other. And Synopsis, New York, or I think Charlie Kaufman films in general, I think are a pretty good comparison because they are also about the blurring of the boundaries between reality and fiction, about how basically your reality can end up being just a simulation of reality, but how that simulation can actually end up replacing reality itself. I definitely think those comparisons are valid. This is a film that definitely deals with similar themes, such as, the distinction between where reality ends and where fiction begins, basically just disappearing, and the two things basically merging into one entity, or the moral dilemma of having to follow people around, basically that being a major part of your job, or just the inability of engaging in a conversation in a natural way. And I definitely don't think this film is a rip-off. I definitely think it manages to become its very own little thing about the sort of prison we create for ourselves with all of our modern technologies and in our modern societies, in a way that can be also very figurative, but also quite literal, I think. I think the film definitely discusses the way we are influenced by our surroundings, and also the way the state of mind and the state of soul of a person, especially of a person who constantly feels the need to be in his comfort zone and to be comfortable all the time, and to not take any risks ever, how that can have a drastically debilitating effect on the development of that person's emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills. So I definitely think this film is very much about things backfiring on you. It's very much about hypocrisy, and it's most importantly about the hypocrisy of wanting to live a life unnoticed, and just how impossible that actually is. I really love this quote from the director who said that we live in times where everybody wants to be seen, everybody takes pictures of themselves, everybody creates a second, more brilliant self on the web. I was interested in a man who is invisible, a private eye who sees everything through his camera, but nobody sees him, until the day a stranger turns the camera on him. Not funny when the tables are turned on you, huh, motherfucker? But the interesting thing is that the film actually is a little bit funny. It's definitely whimsical, it's definitely very, playfully bizarre when it comes to tone. I feel that the film constantly shifts between being uplifting and depressing, and being humorous and dour, and being melancholic and blissful, almost all at the same time simultaneously. And once you actually start thinking about what happens in the film, it actually does make a lot of sense, because while eventually Aloys figures out the identity of the woman who is calling him, they start talking, they start getting to know each other, and they start going on these imaginary journeys, these imaginary walks, through the forest. They start going to restaurants and eating together and going to parties and stuff like that. And them, as well as you, the viewer, are thinking wow, this is great. But at the same time, there's always a moment where you're thrust back into reality, and you realize that, okay, while this is great, it's not real. It's imaginary, it's false, it's fake, it's make-believe. But at the same time, you always get the sense that, okay, still, this is a step in the right direction, and the next step is to just take this that's imaginary and turn it into reality. I was actually quite surprised to read some of the reviews people have written about this film, in which some of them have said that they think that the first half of the film is stronger than the second half, because they thought that during the second half of the film, it becomes sort of derivative, it becomes sort of directionless, and apparently the fantasy aspect of the film kind of took some viewers out of the experience. And I was actually quite surprised to read something like that, because for me, honestly, it was completely the other way around. I definitely thought the first half was boring, more boring at least, and I definitely thought that Aloys as a character was less interesting when he is alone than he becomes as he starts like knowing this woman, starts communicating with this woman, because I think during the second half of the film, that's where the heart is. That's where the film actually comes into being its own thing, and it's all about the dynamic. I think it's all about how these two characters like take each other out of their comfort zones, because like in the beginning it's pretty obvious. Like I said, Aloys is a very very lonely and very creepy man, but here comes this woman who starts talking to him, and he becomes a better person by it, and he actually ends up helping her as well. She does end up in a pretty bad place emotionally speaking eventually during the film, and he surprisingly enough becomes very supportive towards her, and it's something that I wasn't expecting, and it definitely turns the character into a very like three-dimensional and very fleshed out character. I definitely don't think the film becomes weaker during the second part. I definitely think it becomes a lot stronger. I wasn't disappointed in the slightest, and it's possible that this is a film that might not be for everyone. It's definitely something that's for me. It's definitely something that's my cup of tea. I definitely think it makes great use of visual storytelling. There are some scenes in which she is talking to him on the phone, and she used to work at a zoo. So Aloys eventually ends up going to the zoo, visiting the zoo she used to work at, and she is talking about all of these animals, and she is talking about loneliness and about memory and stuff like that. And while she is talking about the animals, you do get the sense that she in fact is talking mostly about herself, and using just the animals as a sort of avatar. Or there are other scenes in which he is walking around the forest talking on the phone, and he gets entangled with the wire from the phone or around these trees. Or there's probably the most memorable and the most surreal scene in the film, in which the two of them are organizing this party at Aloys's apartment, and they're playing this electric organ thingy, and we see all of the people invited showing up who we've seen previously in the film, people who Aloys has been mean to and who he has mistreated, and they are just there having fun partying, and it's weird, it's bizarre, it's funny, it's crazy, and it eventually even that scene becomes quite sad later on when we see Aloys watching it on a television, and it really gives you the sense that okay, this is a memory. I mean, this is a moment that in his mind has turned into an actual memory. He is watching it as something that in his mind is actually something that really happened, something that's real, and not just something that was imagined between the two of them. And therefore I definitely think the film is also very much about imagination, and how imagination can play an incredibly huge part in the way people perceive each other. I definitely believe that there are multiple images of each and every one of us existing. I mean, we have the way we perceive our very own selves, so that's our very own individual image of ourselves, but then we have the way each and every one of everyone else perceives ourselves, and that's their own image of ourselves. And I think the film definitely shows how dangerous and just how crazy it can be to not know or to not be willing to realize where one ends and where the other one begins. And the film I also definitely think is very much about the difficulty of overcoming and of conquering loneliness, and it definitely shows how conquering loneliness is not just something as simple as having people around you. You know, the problems of the mind and most importantly of the soul are really not as simple as we would like to imagine. So that will be my 2 cents of Aloys, folks. I liked this film, I would recommend it. Might not be for everyone, I have absolutely no clue. The only way you will find out is to check it out for yourself. My question to you guys would be, what are some of your favorite films that take place in this sort of hyper reality? You know, like this film is simultaneously taking place in reality, but it's also taking place in a sort of imaginary world that's not a fantasy world. It's actually taking place in characters' heads, but it's sort of like this sort of hyper reality aspect to it. So don't forget to leave your answers in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed my review, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so I can see you later with other reviews. Thanks for watching, and as always, folks, stay cool, stay awesome, and goodbye.